All right. Well, welcome to another episode of Comic Book Squares. We're going to do another interview episode today. My name's Shane.
I'm Paul.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Mike. Let's get this show started.
Well, Jordan, thanks for joining us. Why don't you do us a favor and just kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your book?
Yeah, well, I'm Jordan Clark. I'm a comic book writer. I've been writing for 12 years now. It always feels longer and longer each time I say it. But I've started doing a lot of, self-published stuff, some anthology stuff, and then was lucky enough to be involved with the Bitch Planet triple feature from Image Comics back in 2016, 2017. And from there have, kind of slowly built it up. I've done some stuff for IDW, for their Star Wars Adventures comics. I've done some stuff for DC, 2 issues of Aquaman. Very, very fortunate to be part of the first class of the Milestone Initiative over at DC Comics. And then now I have Samurai Sonja coming out very soon, starting in June and running through October. So that's, a little bit about what I got going on.
Awesome. So, I was reading a little bit about like some of their interviews and stuff that you've done, and you were talking about how comics, you were into them a little bit, but there wasn't a lot of comic shops for you to get involved. It wasn't until later when you saw stuff like Watchmen, Mouse, all that got you back into it. What, how did those experiences with those books that got you back into it, how did they affect you, like, coming in as a writer? Like, do they, how did they lead to how you're a storyteller?
For sure. I think, like, again, growing up, it was a lot of just like grab what you can. And most of my stuff was coming from either like the animated shows like X-Men or Spider-Man or Batman, or like a lot of the video games. So I was aware of a lot of the characters and stuff like that, but I hadn't really gotten into just the entire world of comics, right? Like as a wide open space. And so, in college, I had a really great professor who was just kind of like, hey, have you read this? Have you seen this? Have you, checked this out? And like, the more that I kind of got into it, the more I got sucked into, superhero stuff. Like, obviously, very, very sad. Rest in peace, Tim Sale. But like, Long Halloween, like when I read that, I was like, oh, like you can do this. Oh, this is crazy. And then even from there, I got into stuff like, like Day Trippers by Fabio Moon and Gabriel Ba, and like even spreading out into stuff like, there was American Vampire was coming out when I started getting back into comics, and at Marvel, Hawkeye was starting to come out. So like even the possibilities of like what a superhero comic could be within that space. And then, going over and reading, stuff that Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips were doing. And like, just the whole kind of world opened up to me where I was like, wow, like comics, yes, superheroes, and like even within superheroes, you can do a lot of stuff. But like, look at all these other incredible books going on that you can like really play around with a lot of different storytelling techniques. So for me, I think, my grounding and my basis in comics is always coming from, a superhero perspective, just because that's kind of where I came into it. But, I've also like loved reading stuff that is not even just not superhero adjacent, but like I'm talking with somebody about Giant Days soon for their podcast. And like Giant Days, I would put up there as like one of the best comics ever made, from start to finish. And like, that's completely, it's 4 girls at university in London. It has nothing to do with any superhero stuff or any, crazy over the top stuff. But like, it feels like you're reading a really great sitcom, and like the ability for comics to do something like that, which is completely like left of what people might expect for it, I think has influenced the way that I try to approach comics, which is looking at it as just kind of this wide open space where obviously there's ways that you can go that are, the tried and true methods, and like those work for a reason, but also leaving stuff open to try to play around and experiment and try to figure out new ways to, put your ideas into the stories.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's very cool that you say that, because I was thinking as you were talking about, kind of some of the genres and what you've experienced, and just kind of like taking boundaries that seemed like they were kind of there, even though maybe they weren't real evident, but just expanding that. So let's circle back around to some of your more recent work, right? The Samurai Sonja and that. So taking that, like what you just mentioned about kind of expanding and kind of tweaking, sometimes historical references and things like that. Like, what did Samurai Sonja, why Samurai Sonja? Like, what is it that speaks to you with this series?
Yeah, well, Dynamite was looking to do, more continued alternate versions of Sonja. They had been doing Sonja Versal with Christopher Hastings and Pascal Colano, and then they followed it up with Hell Sonja, which was like, a demon variant of Sonja with like her own Sonja team that was going around and fighting all these other, multiversal threats. And they wanted to kind of keep that going with these different versions of Sonja. And so, having seen everything that Christopher had been doing, I was trying to think what else could you kind of add to that. And for me, I don't know why my brain immediately just kind of connected these, like the Western kind of sword sandal fantasy stuff with the, samurai fantasy folklore, and even thinking about stuff like Kurosawa and thinking about stuff like Vagabond and, all these different ways that, sure, right, you've got a little bit of like the chivalry and the Bushido code kind of lining up, and they both have swords and they both have armor and they both have, some of these other things, but there's enough distinction between the two that like it does feel like its own very separate, new and fresh setting. And so, trying to bring what people like about Red Sonja and what people kind of expect from those books, but also adding a completely different setting, a completely different cultural background, completely different, even like folklore and legends, like they have the yokai, which are their own versions of these, monsters and creatures that are different from your goblins and your orcs and, all the other things. They both have dragons. So you still got the dragons, but, like it makes it feel new again, and for people who have been reading Red Sonja for a long time, it's not a complete departure from what they know, but from people who have never read the story before, it's also something where you can kind of jump in with this new version of the character and it'll give you a lot of the feel. But it's still a different enough story that it feels unique and fresh on the tongue.
Awesome.
Yeah, 100% agreed. When I looked at the cover, it says Samurai Sonja, and then I'm looking at, and then I see the chainmail, that Red Sonja normally wears, and I said that's a great integration with sort of the the samurai garb and and then all the variant covers and the different iterations. When I guess I'd have to ask, with you being the writer, did you describe how the character would look, or was that more the artist? Was it a collaboration? Like, you talked about, developing the idea, but getting it to paper and what it looks like, right?
Yeah.
How did that process go?
It was a little bit of both, like I was really focused on making sure that we are historically accurate as possible, right? Like pulling from, actual samurai armor, samurai weaponry, all of that stuff. But then also, like, it is fantasy and it is very much so Red Sonja, and part of like what people expect just in terms of, like the chainmail and all that stuff. But it, again, like just serendipity, samurai did have chainmail, you know what I mean? So it's not like, a situation where we're just making something up. Like you are actually able to, bridge those things together. So I think for me, I wanted to give, Pascal something that's like, okay, here's what they actually look like, like pulling from a lot of reference photography and, even from like the, the paintings of the time, to kind of give him a sense of like, okay, well, this is the basis, right? We're kind of aiming for something akin to this, but also mixing that in with, the usual Red Sonja, gear and outfit, and then figuring out how we could make that look, again, something like you're saying, you look at the cover, like that isn't too far off from what we would normally expect from a Red Sonja cover or a Red Sonja, character design, but also integrating a lot of the different things that are like, even like, a lot of samurai wear these masks that were like very much so meant to intimidate, and very much so meant to give them, a more, like terrifying look, but also a lot of that stuff was like making reference to, you know, their clan and kind of identifying them on the battlefield. So it's like, you know, it's me, you know, like we're on the same team, but also,
Right.
you know, like I'm trying to distinguish myself and stand out amongst all the other samurai, you know, because that's kind of like when that's your reputation, right? Like people know you on sight, you know, from, you know, a lot of the things that you wear on the battlefield. And so we wanted to give her a distinct enough look as well. So when you're seeing her, you know, fight monsters or, you know, even in a larger group of people, you can definitely pick her out amongst, you know, everybody on the page.
Yeah. Yeah. So what, you know, one thing I have to ask is, you know, we did a lot of research into this book, and I plan on picking it up next week, you know, so really looking forward to it. One thing I noticed on one of the websites, they had a couple of, and I'm not sure if they're variant covers or not, but they're drawings of the character, but they're sort of on that illuminated type of you know, manuscript type paper. I don't, you know, hopefully you're familiar with that. You've seen those. But it didn't look like, I don't know if those are like super variants or what, but you know, I love that kind of artwork. So I really like variant covers. I'm not, you know, if they're done properly, I think it's a great tool. And it seemed like with this character, there's a lot of room for that kind of different interpretations. So
yeah, I mean, Dynamite loves a variant cover, and they really went all out with this one, which I appreciate because, like you're saying, there's definitely a lot of different ways to interpret it, and even the artists they got to come on, like some of the people that I was seeing, I was like, whoa, these are
right?
names, right? These are people who, you know, like you can recognize their art off site. So I think that was, you know, something hopefully that's gonna, you know, additionally boost the book because there's a lot of just beautiful variant covers that go along with it. Like the main one I really like, but then, you know, seeing a couple of the different ones that are out there, I'm just like, that's quality stuff.
Nice stuff, right?
Yeah.
Nice stuff. Yeah. Great stuff.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Well, I actually wanted to kind of bring it way back to, you know, how you got started. You said you've been writing for 12 years, but, you know, we've interviewed a bunch of different people, and a lot of the people that we end up interviewing, you know, they're still within, I guess, the more indie platforms. And so to see all of the work that you've done, you know, working on Batman and Aquaman and Bitch Planet, I mean, you feel like you just jumped right in and got, you know, so kudos to you, man. I mean, I'm super happy for you that you were able to launch like right away, but you know, how did that happen? Did you to get in so quickly as you did?
It is one of those like overnight success, but not stories, right? Where I think people see somebody and they're like, wow, where did you come from? Like, great, you know, you're doing all this stuff now. And it's like, yeah, but I've been doing this for a long time before, you know, I was able to get, you know, in certain places. And I think for me, you know, I think, you know, there's definitely a lot of people who come from like a film and TV background. And like I was going to school for broadcast journalism, you know, originally, and was doing stuff where I was kind of getting into the behind the scenes of like, you know, television production and film production and stuff like that. And really wanted to do that, but also like that costs a lot of money. Like, comics also cost money, but there's a difference in the level of how much things cost. But I really just started out like doing very small things. I did a small web comic with somebody for, you know, like a year and a half, and I got out there and tried to do some, you know, smaller, you know, short runs of books. And like it's one of like the first story I ever submitted to an anthology got accepted, and then like crickets, you know, for a while. And I think it's kind of, you know, it's kind of like that thing where you have, it's not even like one step forward, two steps back, but it's just like you're in a field that everybody is trying to do, right? There's so many people trying to get into comics in all the different various ways. And even going to conventions, you know, being in Artist Alley, like there's a whole bunch of talented people in Artist Alley. So it's one of those measures of like hard work, but then luck, right? Like you need a little bit of luck. And like I was lucky enough to meet Kelly Sue DeConnick at Heroes Con, you know, came up and showed her like one of the, you know, books I had put together on my own. She liked it. She was into it. She was showing it to like her editor who was sitting next to her. You know, I met and talked with them a couple of times, you know, at the con. And then I left and I was like, that was great. I'll never see those people again. But like, it was nice to have, you know, that weekend of like, you know, getting to talk to them. And then, a couple of weeks later, like, I get an email from the editor saying, "Oh, we're putting together this Bitch Planet, book. Would you like to be a part of that?" And I think that's just a testament to, like, if I hadn't done the work and gone and been there and talked to her, it would have been a nice conversation, but I wouldn't have anything to show. If I had done the work and she didn't have a book that she needed people for, I would have talked to her and had a great time and showed her my work. And there was nothing that she could do for me. But it was just, again, one of those just nice serendipitous moments where, like, I had something, she needed something, and, like, they were able to connect on that. And I think sometimes it is just, those moments, but it's also just kind of staying prepared, right? Like, in the times between, I did the Bitch Planet anthology and then also nothing, for a long, like, like, you kind of have that expectation of, like, oh, finally my break. And now, the phones are ringing, the email, the inbox is filled up, like, we're doing the thing. But, you have to keep, you got to be a shark, in certain instances, and keep moving. And, like, once I realized, oh, like, I have to keep going, I just kept making books. And I think the main thing is just, your mentality should be that nobody can tell me that I can make comics, right? Like, you shouldn't be waiting around for somebody to say, yes, and now we would like you to do whatever, what I mean? Like, your idea should be, well, I'm going to do something, if I'm not going to do something for a publisher, I'm going to do something on my own, whether it's a Kickstarter, whether I'm just posting comics on Instagram, whether, I'm just doing little things on my own that maybe nobody's going to see, but, like, I'm still working, I'm still keeping sharp, I'm still improving and trying to figure out, what the next thing is going to be. And so, like, it's been a great kind of run here in the last couple of years where, like, I've been, again, very fortunate to be in these places, and, like, I've tried to make the most of each opportunity that I've gotten, but, never necessarily coming into it with the expectation that this means that, like, definitively I'm in, I made it, my time now, as much as it's just like, all right, here's another thing for the resume. But trying to keep your eyes on the next thing, whether that's something that, again, like, it's great when a publisher comes in, because that means that it's not my money and somebody else is, spending that and putting that together. And that's always nice. But at the same time, okay, I have a few ideas that I would do for a Kickstarter. I've got a few ideas that I would do, it's just like small, short anthology type books and stuff like that in my back pocket, that if it's like, all right, had that time, did that stuff, that was great, but now, I have to go on to the next thing. And so that's always kind of been my mentality, is that, I am always fortunate and always very just like, I love each opportunity, right? Everything that comes my way, I try to make the most of that, but, like, never necessarily, not trying to be pessimistic about it, you know what I mean? But, like, realistic, right? Exactly. Realistic. These are companies, especially if you're talking about the top of the top, the Marvels, the DCs, these places are places that, like, have their publishing schedule in place for, like, 6 months ahead. You know what I mean? So, like, it's having been in the machine, like, it moves, it's going, you know what I mean? And they are constantly putting these books out, and, if they grab you and put you in, it's like, yes, great. You get that run, you get that time. But they're already thinking months ahead, and you also have to be thinking months ahead, because like, sometimes those things aren't going to line up. Sometimes, the book is over, you put the toys back in the box, and then, it's somebody else's turn to play. And so you have to be thinking about what my next thing is, as well as, because they're thinking about it. So, that's kind of been, how I started out and how I got to here, but also, just thinking about how each step of the way, having been looking forward in a way that's not necessarily, you have to have the ambition, right? You have to have the desire and, the imagination to keep kind of thinking of these new things. But at the same time, just understanding that there's going to be times where you're just kind of sitting around and kind of waiting, but in that downtime, always making sure that there's something for you to be doing, so that when your turn comes up again, you're ready to go.
Stay creative.
Yeah.
So that's great, because what you just talked about made me think of a question. So this is great. You talked about working for, obviously, the big two, working for Image, working for Dynamite, and not that this is probably going to be a surprise to you, but obviously you're in the industry, and so do you find you're able to exercise a little bit more creative freedom with Dynamite and Image and the like? Just in terms of the character, or you being the writer, are you with the editor able to more dictate the path of maybe a character like this, Samurai Sonja, that's not established, doesn't have 50 years, 60, 75 years of history?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like I've had a number of different experiences in a number of different places, all of them positive, but it really is just different places work differently. Working with IDW on the Star Wars stuff, like Star Wars is as a whole industry, and there's a whole
Yes.
top
Everything's canon.
Yeah, there's a whole top down thing where like, you got to go through several layers of stuff with the Lucasfilm people because like you're saying, everything is canon. Everything you do is now part of a larger mythology. And so it's not necessarily that I felt kind of like trapped in that, but more so like just thinking about, okay, like they clearly have a plan and an idea for what they want these things to be. So how do I do what I do within that framework, right? Working over with DC, it was a situation where I did 2 issues of Aquaman in the middle of Kelly Sue DeConnick's run. And that was like, okay, I have to think about, there's a story going on. How do I get into this, tell the story that I'm telling, and then get out? Because she's coming back to finish it out,
right.
So like, and also at the same time, there's a tone that she set, there's a style that she set, there's an expectation from the reader, that has been reading this series for 60 something issues or however long it's been going. I came in 62, 63, so like there's a whole run that's been going on before me, so I need to make sure that not necessarily I'm doing like fan fiction, to try to like fit in with what's come before, but at the same time, like I'm doing me, but within the framework of what's happening here. For Samurai Sonja, it is very much so like, this is, what do you want to do? Like you've created this character. We've got, the template and these kind of things that are, again, kind of the expectation, but like the idea behind these books very much so is we are telling a story for, people, again, who enjoy Red Sonja, but also like we want to get some new people in here. We want to get people who maybe aren't familiar with the character or maybe, be more attracted to, the samurai aesthetic or, just kind of this story than maybe the typical Red Sonja story. And so, I've had to think about, okay, who is Red Sonja, the character? What is this mythology? What is it that attracts people to this character and, these stories, but also if I'm doing, a samurai story, if I'm basing this in Japanese culture and Japanese folklore, like how can I be respectful to that and accurate with that? And then on top of that, like, how do I make this fun? Because I think that's the thing.
Sure.
Like,
sure.
This is the longest sustained published thing that I've done. This is going to be a 5-issue miniseries. Everything else I've kind of done has been like one shots, 2 issues here, something here. So like, here's me getting to tell, 5 issues of, the story with this new character. And I want to make it engaging. I want to make it fun. People come to Samurais and in Red Sonja, kind of for a little bit of the same reason. They want to see that action. They want to see, like these big dramatic moments. And like, I want to make sure that that's in there, but also I myself am a very character driven writer. So I'm always coming at it from the perspective of, who is this character? What do they want? Why should you care about what they want? And, even within the framework of action and, like dragons and, Oni and like all kinds of other stuff, like making sure that it feels like this is compelling in a way that's like, yes, I want to see her lop this monster's head off, but also like, what does that mean? The larger context of, this journey and the story, like each step of the way, each battle that she's a part of, each step she gets closer to her goal. Like I want that to feel earned and I want that to feel like something that you should be drawn into. And so, having had to balance all of those things, it's been great. Pascal is incredible. Like getting pages back has been, such a just amazing thing, getting to see how not only he's realized this character, but again merged, these very real world aesthetics and like a lot of the samurai stuff that again we're drawing from Kurosawa films, we're drawing from Vagabond, we're drawing from stuff like Samurai Jack and Samurai Champloo and like all of these different things, but also like. It is a fantasy, like it is like you want to have some of those elements in there. And so I think thus far it's been really great to be able to kind of play around with that stuff and like have the space and the freedom to kind of tell a story that, I'm biased. I'm the writer. I like it. I think it's pretty cool. But at the same time, like I feel really good about each issue that we've done and like everything that I've seen so far. And so, I think for me, just again, having been given kind of the keys to this for a little bit, like I felt like I wanted to take a big swing and try something that I haven't really done before. And, you kind of have certain freedoms, at other places, but again, you're kind of constrained and put into,
you have to stay true to the canon.
It's the deal that you make, right? Like you get your turn, to play around with Batman or Spider-Man and, all of these different characters. But like, unless you're doing, an Elseworlds kind of story, like you can't do anything too crazy, because again, at the end of the day, somebody else is going to be coming behind you to follow up what you just did. Whereas this is just kind of like, would love to do more, would love to do another 5 issues, 10 issues, however many issues. But like, if this is the story, if this is just the 5 issues, like getting a chance to just kind of go big and see what it is also kind of a fun experience, whether you don't have necessarily those kind of constraints on you. You can just do whatever you want, within reason.
Yeah, I mean, it seems
right.
I was going to say, I mean, you've got the historical and the mythological context, and then again, like you said, you've kind of got the keys. So once something like that, Dynamite seems to be really good at promotion as well. They've gotten a lot better over the years. I go back as far as if you remember Alex Ross doing the Bionic Man covers, the Kevin Smith. I love that stuff. I've got them all. And they're very great, very, very good at, getting their stuff to trade, and they keep their promotional, displays are getting better and better. So I could see this, being a launching point for you. I could see this not being just 5 issues. So hoping for
Fingers
you.
crossed.
Yeah.
You betcha.
Well, speaking of like having gotten to work on these different, IPs and stuff, and you said earlier that you had originally gotten like broadcast and you were looking at film and all that. If you could write a movie for any existing IP, what would be the first choice that you would do?
Good question.
Tough. Are we talking like superhero specific, or are we talking like
any existing IP that you're like, I have a vision for this. Like
they call you up and they say, Jordan,
from Blade Runner to Superman,
tough. Like there's a couple different things that I've felt like would be a lot of fun to do. I'm somebody who is not necessarily pop inclined in the sense that like my longings and my desires are like, I want to write Booster Gold, like I want to write Detective Chimp, like I want to write the weird things over in the corner that people, are necessarily like, the big kind of shiny things.
Justice League Dark.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so I think, within that, there's stuff that I've always been like, man, that'd probably be pretty cool. Like I would love a real Swamp Thing movie. I enjoy like the gothic horror.
Yep.
And just kind of
that Bernie Wrightson stuff.
I really like the ideas and everything behind like, Candyman. And I would almost like to inverse the question and do like a Candyman comic series. Like I think that would be a cool kind of way to investigate, because I remember seeing I haven't gotten a chance to read them, but just seeing like scans from some of those Hellraiser comics from the 80s and 90s, and those looked insane.
Man.
But then I guess the last thing would be like, I don't know. I really like Street Fighter, and I wonder if you could do like a live action Street Fighter TV series, or like a limited series.
Oh, yeah.
Just because I think that,
Yeah.
you know, as somebody who's a big fan, I love you know, Jackie Chan. I love you know, even like seeing Everything Everywhere All at Once recently. Just like the action, the choreography involved in that, I think is really cool. And then even going back to, you know, Bruce Lee, like Enter the Dragon style tournament stuff, like just having, you know, that really, because like it's the wide shot, right? It's just like watching people do the choreography uninterrupted, you know, camera breaks, just like we're just gonna watch this crazy fight play out, and like all of that stuff where you see just like the intricacies and like you know, the back and forth and kind of almost the chess game within, you know, those like action sequences is always just like a crazy thing to watch in a video. I know there's a lot of work that goes into it. I know those aren't easy to do, but you know, I would love to see some of that stuff realized, because like a lot of these video games, man, like you look at the Tekken movie, all the Street Fighter movies, most of the Mortal Kombat movies. I think they did a DOA movie, like all of this stuff where it's just like, it should be easier than that. Just let them fight each other and do the things we like for the video games. Like, it doesn't have to be that crazy. But controlled chaos. Yeah, let's just kind of see these, because I'm just like imagining like real world Akuma, you know, and like, that would just I don't know. So that's the kind of stuff I'd like to see. Again, like feasibility wise, I don't know, you know, like Amazon is making the most expensive television show ever made, you know, so like people are willing to spend money on these things. If you could convince somebody, you know, to kind of shell out a little bit, you know, I just get me on that one. I would love to do that. I mean,
they made The Boys pretty interesting. You know, I mean, you're talking about, you know, a comic book that sort of, you know, was kind of a subculture type thing. You know, there were fans of it, and then there were people that would never read it, and probably not unlike The Walking Dead. You know, and that forces, you know, that will force people to sort of go back and check out the source material, which is always good for comics.
Man, Jordan, you said Candyman as a comic series. I'm like, yes, I God, pitch it, dude, because there's so much mythology. There's so much like story and stuff to tell there. I mean,
place it in Chicago.
Beyond the 2-hour movie.
Well, that's the thing. I think comics has the space to do things that both television and film don't. You know, within the ways of like being able to not only just long form, you know, storytelling, but like. Just I always think about stuff like you know, Why the Last Man or Preacher or Sandman. I mean, basically a lot of the Vertigo stuff where like there would just be like a random one shot story built in where it's just like time for something completely different. Here's just this thing happening over here, and oftentimes it would be one of the more fascinating stories. Like I always think about this Hellblazer story where John Constantine goes into this like laundromat with these like 3 women, and it's just like this very unnerving conversation that he's having with them, and like you're kind of seeing like reality start to like just like get messed up in the process, and then he like quickly runs out, and it's just like that's just as an episode of television, like I don't know how that would work, but like as a comic book story, like that's great. Like same thing with Doom Patrol, like the Beard Hunter, like the Beard Hunter issue of the original Doom Patrol. It's just like, this is insane. Like this is just a crazy thing. I don't know.
I love it though.
They tried to do it on the TV show, and it wasn't like it failed, but it just wasn't the same thing because it was just like such a weird left field thing that we never came back to it. Like it was just, here's just an issue of that. And I think comics has the ability to do stuff like that. So even taking something well established like a Candyman, you know, and a lot of other different properties and bringing it into comics where we can kind of just really sit with these characters. I mean, you think about a lot of the Dark Horse Aliens comics, right? Where it's just like, okay, here's a world that you know, and here's characters that we're kind of bringing into that. We can do something very different from the movies, but we can add on to that mythology within it. And I think that's always welcome for people who love those properties, just because it's something new, but also like, again, within the medium, within the form, you can kind of really play around and do some really interesting, cool things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we're gonna put all the links in the bottom.
Yeah. So, hey, everybody listening and watching, whatever, check the show notes, check the description on the video. We'll have links off. So, by the time this comes out, the first issue will be out. So, make sure you go to the link, get that first issue of Samurai Sonja, and then start pre-ordering those other ones.
Yeah, for sure.
Man.
And like the way that I've built and designed the series is that like they're all basically self-contained one-shot stories that link into a 5-issue story. So like if you missed the first one, hopefully you can still pick it up, but you can also just get the second one, and start there, and that's its own kind of story within that. So like it's never too late to jump into the series. Hopefully you're able to read and enjoy all 5, but even if you just pick up one, there's one where Sonja just fights an Oni on a bridge. And if that's what you're looking for, like you could just pick that one up and get into that. So yeah, it's going to be coming out again from June until October. So, hopefully if you like it, put it on the pull list. But even if, a cover just catches your eye, like, there's nothing to say you just can't pick up that one issue and kind of check that one out too.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
You bet.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, this was an absolute pleasure. It was really cool to get to know you. And
yeah, of course. Thank you guys for having me on. This has been great.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you
We
very
really
much.
appreciate it. All right. Well, that was just fantastic getting to know Jordan. Please hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell so we can keep bringing you content like this. And we'll see you on the next one.